we are on track to encounter close to 1 million illegal aliens at our southern border this year.
Good morning to you. It is Thursday, March 7th, and this is Fox and Friends First, happening right now at 4 a.m. here on the East. Thursday morning. I'm Heather Childers. Thank you, as always, for starting your day with us. Let's begin with this, though. Listen to this number. 1 million illegal arrivals expected at our border, and that's just this year. That eye-opening claim from Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. Griff Jenkins is live for us in Washington as President Trump urges lawmakers to support his emergency declaration. So, Griff, you know a thing or two about those caravans.
I do, and you know, Heather, I was in that hearing all day yesterday, and it was eye-opening. Chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Benny Thompson, opened that hearing yesterday by admonishing the secretary for a non-existent, his words, emergency on the border. But in her testimony, Nielsen painted a troubling picture of what's to come.
The projections are dire. At the current pace, we are on track to encounter close to 1 million illegal aliens at our southern border this year. Our capacity is already severely restrained, but these increases will overwhelm the system entirely. This is not a manufactured crisis. This is truly an emergency.
And she defended the president's national emergency declaration, which Democrats aggressively challenged was unjustified.
Have you advised the president on his emergency declaration? Have you given him the grounds for this emergency declaration in the context of what emergency means?
What I have done is I've given him all the facts from the men and women working at the border.
Meanwhile, in the face of GOP defections in the Senate, President Trump took to Twitter to get ahead of a vote that's likely going to rebuke his declaration. The president writing, Senate Republicans are not voting on constitutionality or precedent. They are voting on desperately needed border security. In the wall, our country is being invaded with drugs, human traffickers, and criminals of all shapes and sizes. That's what this vote is all about. Stay united. Meanwhile, caravans, you mentioned, there is another one that reached our border. This time it was a freight train carrying some 400 migrants, Heather, arriving in the border town of Calexico across from Southern California. They ride the trains from southern Mexico in the state of Chiapas, and they make a quick trip to our border. Just one of several we're seeing on the radar. Heather?
Yeah, we're going to talk with a family, some ranch owners that live there at the border in New Mexico, coming up with their take on all this. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Griff. Well, those staggering statistics laid out by the Homeland Security Secretary paint a much different picture than the one that Democrats would like voters to believe. A former CIA analyst, Buck Sexton, says the current crisis is the result of the left distorting reality for years.
It's a long series of lies. Walls don't work. We finally figured out, I think, as a country, that's not true. There's no crisis at the border. That's not true. The caravans will never make it to the border. That's not true. Lie after lie after lie that the media has told. But now that we have new data, it's impossible for them to continue to pretend it's not a crisis. So they say it's only a humanitarian crisis. It's actually multiple crises. There is a humanitarian component, no question about it. But that also ties into the national security component, because now the cartels make sure that when there's a large group that surrenders at the border in one area, guess what? They run the drugs in a sector that they now know has all the Border Patrol agents tied down. So it directly ties into fentanyl. Methamphetamine, by the way, DEA says maybe at the highest usage ever right now in this country. People even talk about meth usage because the opioid crisis is so bad.
Well, Nielsen's testimony came just one day after the Customs and Border Commissioner also called on Congress to address what he, too, calls a very real border crisis. So much more on this to come. Stay tuned. The other big story, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar gives Fox News the silent treatment when questioned about her anti-Semitic comments.
Congresswoman Omar, it seems like there's some confusion among your colleagues. Are you anti-Semitic?
Well, Democrats just delayed their resolution that we've been telling you about to condemn her remarks. They delayed it again. Aisha Husni joins us now live as tensions just continue to rise over what to do with the Minnesota Democrat. Aisha, what's the latest?
Well, good morning, Heather. You know, Democrats are pumping the brakes on punishing the Congresswoman, some even saying she's being targeted. This all surrounds, of course, her tweets suggesting politicians who support Israel have been bought. We've seen a bipartisan outcry over this, and now there's a resolution up for a vote that would condemn anti-Semitism. And Republican pressure is mounting as well to remove the Congresswoman from the Foreign Affairs Committee. But, Heather, it looks like some Democrats are pushing back on any sort of punishment. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi recently said she didn't even think Omar's comments were, quote, intentionally anti-Semitic. And Bernie Sanders said this: we must not, however, equate anti-Semitism with legitimate criticism of the right-wing Netanyahu government in Israel. What I fear is going on in the House now is an effort to target Congresswoman Omar as a way of stifling that debate. That's wrong. Now, we actually asked Congresswoman Omar point blank if she supports a bill that condemns anti-Semitism. Watch this.
I just quickly ask, would you support this resolution condemning anti-Semitism?
Well, last we checked, that resolution still not on the official House schedule for today. And as far as her seat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the chairman of that committee says he is nowhere close to removing her. Heather?
Yeah, and interesting, Nancy Pelosi kind of changing her tune, because originally she said that the comments were deeply offensive. Now she's saying, you know, not intentional. So we'll see what happens. Thank you so much. Great to have you with us.
Thanks.
Well, the anti-Semitism showdown amongst the Democrats causing a rift between the establishment and the far-left freshmen. Newt Gingrich says from one House Speaker to another, that divide shows Nancy Pelosi is losing her chamber.
Look, she is losing control of the House. They may be forced in a desperation move to change the House rules to block Republicans from offering anything, which would, I think, lead to chaos. But she can't get her party to stay together. And if you're in a moderate district, if you're in a district that Trump carried, or if you're in a district that's heavily Jewish, and you're watching the Democrats go crazy, and you are a Democratic freshman running for re-election, this has to be a really decisive moment.
Well, in December, Pelosi told the Israeli-American Council Conference that her party would remain fundamentally pro-Israel. We're going to talk about this coming up more a little bit later in the show as well. Well, all of the missing people in the deadly Alabama tornadoes, they're now accounted for. Today, 2 of the 23 victims will be put to rest. Take a look at these wooden crosses. They were set up to memorialize their lives as anonymous donors pledged to pay for all of the funerals. The family of the youngest victim, 6-year-old A.J. Hernandez, now speaking out.
Oh, I love him, man. I love you. And I wish I got one more just little hug or something, you know, because he was here just the day before it all happened. And, you know, of course, you know, not even expecting what's to come.
Just 6 years old. Well, President Trump will tour all that devastation tomorrow, and we'll, of course, cover it for you. How about this? Embattled R&B singer R. Kelly facing some new allegations. He assaulted a 13-year-old girl. Police in Detroit want to speak with that woman, who would now be 30. Her claims coming on the same day that R. Kelly spoke out in an explosive interview denying similar accusations from a lot of other women.
Have you ever had sex with anyone under the age of 17?
No. I'm fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this. I gave out 30 years of my career.
Robert.
30 years of my career. Y'all trying to kill me.
Unreal. R. Kelly has pleaded not guilty to sex assault charges, but he is waking up in jail in Chicago this morning. He was taken into custody for failing to pay more than $160,000 in child support. The Air Force is responding after Senator Martha McSally reveals that she was sexually assaulted by a superior officer in the military. Listen.
I stayed silent for many years, but later in my career, as the military grappled with scandals and their wholly inadequate responses, I felt the need to let some people know I too was a survivor.
Well, an Air Force spokesperson saying in part, quote, "We are appalled and deeply sorry for what Senator McSally experienced, and we stand behind her and all victims of sexual assault." The House Intelligence Committee plans to release Michael Cohen's Capitol Hill testimony sometime soon, whatever that means. President Trump's former lawyer wrapping up 8 hours of questioning about possible ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. He gave the committee documents claiming to show edits were made to a statement that he gave to Congress back in 2017. Democrat Adam Schiff calls the testimony, quote, "productive." Cohen goes to prison for lying to Congress in May. And this is really troubling. Did you hear about Jeopardy host Alex Trebek? He revealed that he is fighting stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
I plan to beat the low survival rate statistics for this disease. Truth told, I have to, because under the terms of my contract, I have to host Jeopardy for 3 more years. So help me, keep the faith, and we'll win.
It is a tough one. According to TMZ, the 78-year-old plans to at least finish Jeopardy's current season. Fans and celebrities are offering support, including Wheel of Fortune host Pat Sajak, who tweets in part, "There is no one I know who is stronger and more determined, and I would never bet against him." I wouldn't bet against him either. So good luck. Well, the time now is about 12 minutes after the top of the hour. You know, the war in Afghanistan, it's been going on for nearly 18 years. And now one lawmaker has a plan to bring our troops home. But what would that look like? Chris Naim served in the Middle East, and he joins us live to lay out a possible strategy. And most 16-year-olds are still trying to figure out who they are, what they believe in. But one Democratic lawmaker wants them to vote. So is that... Back with a Fox News alert, a travel warning now being issued for spring breakers heading to Mexico. The U.S. Embassy in Mexico City cautioning people about dangers like assaults and unregulated alcohol. Thousands of Americans head to Mexico every year for the break, and officials are urging people to travel in groups and let family and friends know what you're doing. A similar warning was issued for the Bahamas just last week because of increased crime there as well. So be aware. President Trump says that he will not be happy if reports that North Korea is rebuilding a nuclear site turn out to be true.
The relationship is good. I would be very disappointed if that were happening, and I don't think I will be, but we'll see what happens. We'll take a look. It'll ultimately get solved.
Well, the rogue regime pledged to dismantle the site after the first summit in Singapore last year. But new satellite photos appear to show increased activity after the Vietnam summit last week. That meeting, of course, ending with no deal on denuclearization.
It's important to know when to declare victory and leave a war. I think that time is long past. It's time to declare our mission over and our war won. It's time to build here, not there.
Well, Senator Rand Paul making his case to end the longest war in our nation's history. His new bill would give just 1 year to remove all U.S. troops from Afghanistan, and it would give veterans a payout of $2,500 each. So what would an end to this war look like? Joining me now is GOP strategist and Middle East war veteran Chris Naim. Thank you so much for joining us. We certainly appreciate it.
Good morning, Heather.
So as we begin our conversation, let's bring up some of the facts about Afghanistan. We have been at war in Afghanistan for over 17 years. Currently, we have more than 16,000 troops deployed to Afghanistan. And then if you take a look at the deaths and the wounded, over 2,000 soldiers have been lost, died in Afghanistan. Over 20,000 have been wounded. So what do we need to do? What would be the best case scenario for ending this war? And do you agree with some of the proposals from Rand Paul?
I do agree with some of those proposals from Rand Paul, and Senator Paul's been talking about these for a long time. And another statistic we could put up there, Heather, is that less than 1% of the U.S. population serves in the military. So of that percent, it's a very small percent that is constantly being strained, constantly deploying, multiple deployments. It's worn us out. So we do need to look at turning the page. we're either going to stay there forever, which many, Pentagon officials want to do, or we're going to make a change and we're going to restructure the power structure over there, and that's the direction it looks like we are going to be heading in at this point.
What about this 1 year time frame? Because what he's suggesting is that we would have 1 year to withdraw our troops. At that time, the handover to the Afghan government would be drawn up within 45 days of passage. Does that give us enough time to stabilize the area and leave?
It gives us enough time to put a plan in place and defer action to the government there. I mean, the idea that the Afghan government is going to have some sort of allergic reaction to us leaving because they need time to set things up. What the hell have they been doing this entire time? The time has come for them to do something. Our European allies have been helpful. There's concerns that, we've been doing a lot of logistical support for them. So if we leave, we can't have both. And so it's endless war, endless financial suffering, or we need to make this change. So it does put a timeline. No one's happy about it, but it's inevitable. It's the direction our country needs to go in at this point.
Yeah, so should we really be making a deal with the Taliban? What about that?
It's another bad. So the Taliban has about control of about 40% of the country, which is not a statistic that we feel comfortable with. However, they have a very small control over the civilian population, and they're mostly in rural areas as well. So, it's a two-level plan. The Afghan government, the Taliban, they need to figure out what their security is going to look like. This idea that if we leave, there's going to be a civil war. We cannot be the world police any longer. Heather, we're exhausted. We're tired of it. We're going to move in a different direction.
What about if we leave and Russia steps back in?
We don't believe that Afghanistan is the biggest centrifuge for different power shifting in the region. There's other areas, North Korea and others, of more strategic importance. It's going to be difficult, but it's in our best interest as a country, for our veterans and our military, to make this change.
Bring them home. Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us, Chris, as always.
You bet.
Welcome back. Taylor Swift shaking off her apolitical past, saying that she will be more vocal up to the 2020 election, in case you were waiting for that. So are the fans going to hate, or embrace the newly political pop star? Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7, Sirius XM 115 is here with the online reaction.
I loved all those puns.
Hate, get it?
Fabulous job. So she did an interview with Elle magazine, and it was titled 30 Things I Learned Before Turning 30. And she said it took her a long time to formulate her political opinions, but she's finally come to this conclusion, saying, invoking racism and provoking fear through thinly veiled messaging is not what I want from our leaders, and I realize that it actually is my responsibility to use my influence against that disgusting rhetoric. So you can see that as a thinly veiled attack on President Trump. And she did famously endorse Tennessee Democrats in the midterm election, and when she did, there was a big spike in voter registration. But the interesting thing is that she used to be a country singer, and a lot of her fans are in deep red states. So you're also seeing messages like this. Appealing only to half of the country will not gain you more fans, says Herbert on Facebook. An Instagram user says, informed, seriously, time to shake her off. And another Twitter user says, she's not so swift at politics. I'll take a hard pass. So you're always going to face criticism when you go political, which is why I think Dolly Parton does it best. Stay out of the politics. Just stick to singing. But they don't do that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, does she still have her compound next to the Kennedys?
Oh,
up there,
she has multiple houses. Yeah,
so,
that's right.
I don't know. We'll see what she does next. Let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg, though, because I saw this headline. I wondered exactly what it was talking about. Facebook transforming into a privacy-focused platform.
Very, very interesting announcement from Mark Zuckerberg yesterday. That's right. He says that he's pivoting the company more towards privacy. He's going to be building a privacy platform for users. We're talking total encryption and a way to delete old messages. He says, I believe the future of communication will increasingly shift to private encrypted services where people can be confident that they say to each other, stay secure. This is the future I hope we will help bring about. Really interesting, coming from a guy whose company is synonymous with privacy issues.
Which is perhaps why he's doing it.
Yeah, so one Twitter user says, I'm sure there's a shady twist. No thanks, Zuck. And another Twitter user says, about 10 years too late. So a lot of skeptics out there over this one, especially if you recall recall in December that a report came out, that bombshell report came out saying that Facebook allowed companies like Netflix and Spotify to read people's private Facebook messages.
Yeah, and speaking of shady and people not quite understanding, what in the world is a pound cake cheese steak?
I would call myself an adventurous eater, and I am not on board with this one. So there's a restaurant in Philadelphia that's serving up cheesesteaks, but they've replaced the bread with pound cake. So is it a dessert or is it dinner? So many questions. One Twitter user says, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And Jeff says April Fool's is still a few weeks out. What? So I guess Philly, of course they're known for cheesesteaks. I guess they're also known for pound cake. I don't know that. I got to ask Jillian about that.
If you're in a hurry and you want to have dessert and a meal at the same time, I guess that's what that's for.
Yeah, I like the guy that says just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Someone please try that and let us know.
Joe's Steaks, what are you thinking?
Yeah, let us know how it tastes. Thank you so much, Carly.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Really weird. Well, the time now is about 5:30 and begging for a border wall. One family that has owned a ranch in New Mexico for more than 100 years says enough is enough. They join us live with a message to Democrats who insist that there's no crisis. And name, date of birth, and Planned Parenthood's phone number. The new student ID law being stories for you this morning at this hour. Funerals begin today for the 23 victims of the deadly tornadoes in Alabama. All of the missing people are now accounted for. President Trump will tour the devastation in Lee County tomorrow. House Democrats delay the vote to condemn anti-Semitism yet again. The resolution, seen as a rebuke on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's controversial comments about Israel, it's being expanded to include all bias. It's unclear when the House will vote. And an urgent warning from Homeland Security. Nearly 1 million illegal immigrants are expected to arrive at our southern border by the end of the year. President Trump now calling on Republican senators to keep supporting his emergency declaration. This as another caravan arrives just south of California carrying some 400 migrants. Well, this immigration crisis hitting home for our next guest, Russell and Brandy Johnson. They own a ranch at the southern border, and they say that they want the president to build his wall on their land. And they join me now with more. First of all, thank you so much for joining us very early this morning. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
You know, it's important for people to hear from people like you who are down there every day dealing with what the president calls a crisis, but then you hear Democrats say it's a, manufactured crisis. How does that make you feel when you hear Democrats say that? And tell us about the situation there at your ranch. You're in New Mexico, correct?
Yes, ma'am. When we hear things like that, it really disappoints us, and it just goes to show that they're not down there witnessing what we're witnessing.
And some of what you are witnessing, describe that for people at home.
Right now where we live, I know the new stats came out the other day, and we're actually in the El Paso sector, even though we're in New Mexico, where the numbers have skyrocketed. And in our area, we're not seeing the asylum seekers, we're actually seeing more of the criminal activity.
Yeah.
And so we have what they call drive-throughs, which is the vehicles crossing. We have the foot traffic, which is what Border Patrol would their terminology. And then you just, I don't know, our kids are seeing it and we're seeing it. It's really hard to hear people say that we're making this up. It's very disheartening, and if you don't live it, it's just hard. I don't even know how to express just the disappointment and what's going on.
And this ranch has been in your family for more than 100 years. You share about 8 miles, from what I understand, with the Mexico border there on your ranch. And right now, all you have there is barbed wire. So you've invited the president, build the wall there on your land, right?
Yes, ma'am. We share 8 miles. Our ranch shares 8 miles of border with Mexico, and in that 8 miles, 5 of it has either Normandy-style vehicle barrier or post and rail vehicle barrier, and the remaining 3 miles is just barbed wire fence that we maintain at our own expense with no compensation for damages done by these vehicle drive-throughs. And on this 8-mile stretch, it's a combination of private land, BLM, and state trust land. And on the public lands, there's already the Roosevelt Reservation of 1907 gives the U.S. government a 60-foot easement for the purpose of border security. And what we're telling President Trump is, you've already got the easement through the public land. We will give the U.S. government a continuation of that Roosevelt easement through our private property to build the wall.
You know, we take a look at these numbers and we can bring them up. You referenced the number of illegals, and it's up like 100%. But it's not the first time I've heard you mention the different type of person who is crossing the border illegally now. I've talked with other ranchers and other farmers there along the border, and they say, you know, that's something that people really aren't talking about, because what used to be families and people who were a little more respectful coming through these areas, that's not the case now. Now you have criminals, you have drug dealers, you have gang members coming across your territory. And you mentioned your children. How old are your children, and do you fear for their safety as a result of this?
We do, and because of that, we typically don't talk about their age. We have one that's school aged and one that's not. And anytime I'm out on the ranch with my husband, we have our children with us. And a lot of these roads that they're using are actual ranch roads that we're out whenever we're out on the ranch. So it's a very unnerving situation that we're out there. We have to be out there, and people are saying that it's not going on.
What are you doing to protect yourselves?
You're always aware of your surroundings. We do carry protection with us, and being that we're in an area, there's no cell phone service down there. That's something we've been trying to get down in our area, is cell phone service, because we're in an isolated area, and the only form of law enforcement we do have is Border Patrol. And so, you know, like I say, we try to be aware of our surroundings. You might pay attention to what time of day you go into certain areas, because you just never know who you might encounter out there.
Yeah. Just hearing you speak, though, and seeing the concern on your face, obviously you need some help. And hopefully there are some lawmakers listening right now, and they will get you the help that you need. Russell Brande, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. We appreciate it. Please stay in touch.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Man, they need some help down there. Well, Paul Manafort faces up to 24 years in prison when he is sentenced today. Another story we're following. The former Trump campaign manager was convicted of bank and tax fraud for concealing nearly $17 million in income. This is the only case brought to trial so far in special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia probe. The charges stem from Manafort's lobby and consulting work in Ukraine, but does not directly address Russia's interference in the 2016 election. Worth noting. Well, police are desperate for answers after the body of a little girl is found stuffed in a duffel bag and then dumped on a hiking trail. The girl seen in this sketch, take a look, is believed to be between 8 and 13 years old. Investigators near Los Angeles don't know who she is or how she died or who is responsible. She was found by maintenance workers. If you think you know who that is, let somebody know. Well, Down syndrome should not be a death sentence. Pro-life activists pushing that message in Utah. Governor Gary Herbert is expected to sign a measure banning abortions of babies just because they have Down syndrome. If approved, the bill would not go into law until courts uphold similar bans in other states, though. Well, students as young as 12 could soon have Planned Parenthood's number in their wallets. A California lawmaker wants schools to put the information on student ID cards. Assemblyman Jesse Gabriel's bill says that it would give them access to health resources. The proposal would require private and Christian schools to comply. And critics say it's unconstitutional, though. Planned Parenthood publicly endorsed and contributed $4,400 to Gabriel's 2018 campaign, so that may or may not have something to do with it. The time now is about 20 minutes until the top of the hour. So how tolerant is the so-called tolerant left? And who's really running the party? Our political panel on deck. Well, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar remains silent when pressed by Fox News about the controversial remarks that have many accusing her of being anti-Semitic.
Are you anti-Semitic? Would you support this resolution condemning anti-Semitism? would you support the resolution condemning all forms of bigotry?
And instead of rebuking Omar's comments, the left is pointing their fingers at President Trump. Here to discuss is Republican strategist John Thomas and University of Maryland lecturer Jason Nichols. Thank you both for joining us this morning. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks, Heather.
So let's actually bring up that quote right away as we begin, where they're pointing the fingers at President Trump. And this is from Hakeem Jeffries, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, who's the chair, of course, of the House Democratic Caucus. He says, we're committed to decisively condemning anti-Semitism, racism, white supremacy, Islamophobia, homophobia, and the rise in hate that has taken place in this country, perhaps coincidentally, over the last 2 years since January of 2017. So, John, what is your response to that?
You know, Mr. Jeffries' whataboutism isn't going to cut it here. The Democrats largely base their messaging these days on identity politics and attacking Trump for allegedly race baiting and others, but when they have it going on in their own house, Heather, they do nothing. Remember, there's still a sitting governor of Virginia who was caught wearing blackface, the Attorney General of Virginia, and now you've got a member of Congress of a Democratic Party who's repeatedly been anti-Semitic, and they do nothing. The hypocrisy here is stunning and, most importantly, just disappointing.
Jason, what about that? I mean, the Democratic Party right now, they can't even come together to present this resolution rebuking anti-Semitism. What is going on?
Well, they're crafting a resolution as we speak against all forms of hate and bigotry. And so I think that what they're saying is that we've seen a rise, and it's, you know, something that can be calculated. We've seen a rise in all kinds of bigotry, from anti-Semitism, from what we've seen in the attacks in Pittsburgh and other places. It's gone up 37%. We had people in Charlottesville screaming, Jews will not replace us.
But is all of that, and I'm not arguing your points there, but is all of that in an attempt to deflect from the anti-Semitic comments that we're dealing with right now from Omar?
Absolutely not. And, you know, I think that what people want to do is talk about all forms of bigotry and try to reject them all. Not pick one and
Jason,
have to deal with another later. And again,
I think the
we
issue
can talk
here,
about...
Jason, it's not mutually exclusive. You can do one and the other at the same time.
Well, I would say, well, again,
anti-Semitism,
I can
and
agree
you
with
can
you, but why not do that with your own parties? First of all,
can I hear what you're saying when you're both talking at the same time? Especially at 4:45 in the morning. So finish your comment, Jason, and then let John respond.
Yeah, well, I would say, you know, I think when we talk about hypocrisy, we're seeing it from John and his side. Why don't they condemn the president when he calls Haiti and African countries crap hole countries, or a word that I can't even say, even at this hour when the FCC is asleep? Why can't they condemn Charlottesville? Why can't they condemn Steve Scalise, who went to a white supremacist conference? Why don't they condemn?
Okay, so let John respond to that. John, your response.
Okay, first of all, President Trump has condemned hate at Charlottesville. That comment you talk about the
he said there were good people on all sides.
Was off the record. By the way, was off the record. But here's the deal: you're trying to play us with this whataboutism.
So you can be bigoted.
He didn't say members of the KKK were good people. He was talking about people who support statues.
Jason, we have the sitting governor of Virginia, who is still the sitting governor, who refuses to step down. You have this member of Congress who's been blatantly anti-Semitic, yet remains on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Look, it's fine if they want to pass a broader resolution, but they also have to clean it up in their own house, and I think that's the point here.
All right. Well, we are out of time, but I will say maybe we made our own point, because we definitely deflected from Omar herself and the statements that she's made. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate it. Good debate.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, the time now is about 10 minutes until the top of the hour, and the momentum to double the federal minimum wage may have just cleared its final hurdle. And fined for wearing flip-flops? What? The vacation hotspot charging toward could soon double to $15 an hour. Tracy Crosco from our sister network, Fox Business, here with the next steps to push it through. Good morning.
Good morning, Heather. Yes, the next step for this bill would be to go to the House of Representatives for a bill to raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 an hour. Yesterday, it cleared through the House Committee on Education and Labor. It would raise that minimum wage by 2024. It would also phase out the so-called sub-minimum wages. That's for the tipped workers, the disabled workers, also younger workers as well. So this bill is widely supported by Democrats who want to raise that minimum wage. However, it does face some opposition from Republicans who do say that it would result in job losses across the country. It would also hurt small businesses because they'd have to pay for that extra labor.
Well, let's talk about some losses. If you like Amazon's pop-up stores, you're out of luck, though, because they're closing them?
Yes, they're kind of shifting their focus here. So Amazon will be closing its 87 pop-up stores across the country. They have these pop-up stores in Whole Foods, in Kohl's, in malls across the country. And it's a place where you can try out Amazon products, also Amazon services. So you can try out the Echo, the Kindle, Fire tablets, all of that. They're going to be shutting those down, but kind of shifting their focus, opening up and expanding Amazon bookstores and the Amazon 4-star stores. Now, the 4-star stores, that's where they sell products that are rated 4 stars or better on Amazon. We do have one here in New York City, so they're going to be moving toward that retail aspect.
Okay. Tracy Crosco, always great to have you with us this morning.
Heather.
Thank you. Well, some other quick headlines for you. A second federal judge blocks the Trump administration from adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census. The district judge in California ruling the question is this person a citizen of the United States, violates the law, saying that it, quote, threatens the very foundation of our democratic system by underrepresenting Latinos and immigrants. The Supreme Court will hear the Trump administration's appeal of the first ruling next month. So we will follow up on that for you. Well, heart-wrenching photos. This is really sad. Showing workers saying goodbye as a General Motors plant closes its doors at the facility in Lordstown, Ohio, shutting down after 52 years. Folks hugging each other. You can see an American flag draped over the final car to roll off the assembly line. The Chevy Cruze will now be made in Mexico. The plant's closure leaves 1,700 people without a job. 2 more GM plants will shut down this year as the company focuses on electric cars. Well, the time now is about 8 minutes until the top of the hour. How young is too young to have a say in who runs our country? One Democratic lawmaker says that kids should vote at 16. Your comments are pouring in on this one. What do you think? Stories for you this morning at this hour. Funerals begin today for the 23 victims of the deadly tornadoes in Alabama. All of the missing people are now accounted for. President Trump will tour the devastation in Lee County tomorrow. House Democrats delay the vote to condemn anti-Semitism yet again. The resolution, seen as a rebuke on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's controversial comments about Israel, it's being expanded to include all bias. It's unclear when the House will vote. And an urgent warning from Homeland Security. Nearly 1 million illegal immigrants are expected to arrive at our southern border by the end of the year. President Trump now calling on Republican senators to keep supporting his emergency declaration. This as another caravan arrives just south of California carrying some 400 migrants. Well, this immigration crisis hitting home for our next guest, Russell and Brandy Johnson. They own a ranch at the southern border, and they say that they want the president to build his wall on their land. And they join me now with more. First of all, thank you so much for joining us very early this morning. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
You know, it's important for people to hear from people like you who are down there every day dealing with what the president calls a crisis, but then you hear Democrats say it's a, manufactured crisis. How does that make you feel when you hear Democrats say that? And tell us about the situation there at your ranch. You're in New Mexico, correct?
Yes, ma'am. When we hear things like that, it really disappoints us, and it just goes to show that they're not down there witnessing what we're witnessing.
And some of what you are witnessing, describe that for people at home.
Right now where we live, I know the new stats came out the other day, and we're actually in the El Paso sector, even though we're in New Mexico, where the numbers have skyrocketed. And in our area, we're not seeing the asylum seekers, we're actually seeing more of the criminal activity.
Yeah.
And so we have what they call drive-throughs, which is the vehicles crossing. We have the foot traffic, which is what Border Patrol would their terminology. And then I don't know, our kids are seeing it and we're seeing it. It's really hard to hear people say that we're making this up. It's very disheartening, and if you don't live it, it's just hard. I don't even know how to express just the disappointment and what's going on.
And this ranch has been in your family for more than 100 years. You share about 8 miles, from what I understand, with the Mexico border there on your ranch. And right now, all you have there is barbed wire. So you've invited the president, build the wall there on your land, right?
Yes, ma'am. We share 8 miles. Our ranch shares 8 miles of border with Mexico, and in that 8 miles, 5 of it has either Normandy-style vehicle barrier or post and rail vehicle barrier, and the remaining 3 miles is just barbed wire fence that we maintain at our own expense with no compensation for damages done by these vehicle drive-throughs. And on this 8-mile stretch, it's a combination of private land, BLM, and state trust land. And on the public lands, there's already the Roosevelt Reservation of 1907.